So, Robert, I was talking about cannibalism the other day, and I'm, it occurred to me that one way to feed the homeless is to feed the homeless to each other.
Oh, yeah.
Is that going to be a balanced approach to nutrition?
Depends on how much protein the homeless guy that's being fed
Needs. So I thought that's another training question, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, is he squatting, too?
That's something to think about.
Is he squatting?
From the Asgard Company Studios in beautiful Wichita Falls, Texas, from the finest mind in the modern fitness industry, the one true voice in the strength and conditioning profession, the most important podcast on the internet. Ladies and gentlemen, Starting Strength Radio.
Welcome back to Starting Strength Radio. We're here with our friend Robert Santana again. Robert's kind of like a permanent fixture here. He spends a lot of time in Wichita Falls. They must not like him in Phoenix. I don't know of any other reason why he would be here all the time, but he likes us, I guess. But first, before we talk to Robert, we're going to do our favorite segment on the show, and it's called Comments from the Haters. Now, comments from the haters is where the bottom 3% of humanity get on YouTube and just start typing. Sometimes they refer to things that are of interest. Sometimes they're just so incredibly stupid that I have to read them like this. Hey, Rip, this is from E.J. Smythe, or Smith, or something like that. Hey, Rip, stop injecting your political ignorance. It undercuts, 2 words, your professionalism. Letting it show weakens your credibility. Stick to the topic you know well, strength training. You're a prime example of why we need to get rid of the Electoral College. The health of the mind is just as important as the rest of the body. Think about it. We need to get rid of the Electoral College, right? So, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and New York City get to elect the president every year. What a great idea that is. All right, now, here's Robert Magier. And this must have something to do with, when did we talk about the clean? This talking about clean instruction? What was that, just a video or what? Yeah. That was just a video we did. This clean instruction is completely different than instruction from Klokov. Any reason for that? It seems like starting strength instruction is much easier to teach. So maybe this is the reason. To introduce dynamic exercise to normal people. Is it? Maybe. Okay. Oh, I like it when the vegans comment. It's just so fucking cool when vegans write in. A vegan diet, this is M space SN. Is that what that is? MSN? Uppercase S, lowercase n. A vegan diet isn't an eating disorder, you adorable, grumpy old dumbass. Lacks protein, false. Where do you think animals get their protein from? There's some things this individual does not know, isn't there? A human being, it says human being evolve. False. We're omnivores, and weak ones at that, move to animals once nutrients become scarce. Also, grain has changed our digestive just like it did the dog. So again, sorry, Grandpa, you're wrong. Children die, WTF. Where do you pull this shit from? Talk about fake news. A vegan diet sustains life at any stage. And it's confirmed by studies. Studies have confirmed that a vegan diet sustains life at any age. Yes, we're omnivore. Oh, that's boring. All right, now let's see. One more. Shave your head and stop holding onto those scraps. Face it, you are bald, and FYI, you are fat. Scraps. Indeed. And that's comments from the haters. Okay. Robert, the hell's going on? Thanks for being here today. We have just gotten through with a seminar we did this weekend. It featured you and our friend Will Morris. We talked about recovery. We call this a recovery seminar when we talked about both nutrition and rehab, injuries, this sort of thing. Mm-hmm. The whole weekend, I was very impressed with the content. I was pleasantly surprised. It went a lot better than I thought it was going to. There's a whole bunch of stuff everybody learned this weekend, and it was a great event. It really was. We'll be doing it again here. Oh, I don't know, end of January, 1st of February, sometime in there. I think we're going to probably move it to the West Coast next time. So, and we'll be releasing some excerpts from the weekend's lectures over the next few weeks. And if you're interested in these topics, then watch our little clips that we're going to give you from the lectures and make up your mind to come to the event next time it's available. We'll either be doing this in, well, we haven't decided yet. It'll be probably Southern California. So look for that on the website at startingstrength.com, events. It'll be in the events calendar. So, Robert, what's going on, man?
That question.
Yeah, that question.
Not much, man.
Well, can you think of anything you want to discuss today?
I think we should discuss the nutrition linear progression we talked about.
I think so, too.
Yeah.
I think that's an excellent idea,
Yeah.
the nutritional linear progression. So, what is the nutritional linear progression?
Well, it's this little thing I came up with that was kind of inspired by, something you came up with.
The novice linear regression in training.
Yeah.
Obviously. And those of you that follow our material are quite familiar with this. And Robert has expanded upon that idea. And I want to tell us about it.
Well, the whole premise behind it was that, much like training, maybe even arguably worse, nutrition has become excessively complicated. And we get lots of questions about what people should be eating, when they should be eating it, how they should be eating it, what kind of food. There's like a million different things out there, and, this is bad, that's bad, low carb, low fat, vegan, GMO, organic. And I found, much like you did with training, that people are wrapped up in a bunch of minutia that doesn't apply to the majority of people that are reading and buying into nutritional related products and services. They want to buy supplements. They want to buy organic food. They want to avoid GMO.
Right.
They want to eat vegan.
It's death by complexity, basically.
Essentially, yes. So, when I first started training and reading your book and getting coached by Horn periodically, I started.
That's Paul Horn, the legend.
The legend
in Los Angeles.
He's in fact a legend.
He is.
Yeah. It's not a lie.
No.
I had to train at House of Horn.
Wow.
Yeah.
Long time ago, huh? Well, he is a legend. You have access to Paul Horn. Can you get a bill ready for him, Bree, for that? All right.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway. So my wheels were turning, and I'm like, how can I simplify nutrition in a similar manner? And that's kind of how I came up with this thing. And the way we structured the camp yesterday, we went over all the basics of nutrition, starting with calories, how we burn calories in training, and the different macronutrients and their purposes. We don't need to go into all that here, but by the end of it, the question that we're left with is, okay, now what the fuck do we do with all this, right? And, I came up with a list of priorities and an order of priorities.
Mm-hmm.
And, we can talk about that today.
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Priority. Well, let's first decide how you assign priorities to this list. What was your thought process on that?
My thought process was that most diets start by taking stuff away from people. I think it's a pretty fair assessment.
Mm-hmm. What can you not eat?
What can you not eat? Because what do most people want when they seek diet advice? What's the goal?
Weight loss.
Weight
usually.
loss. Most of the time, probably.
Usually it's weight loss.
95% of the time, it's weight loss.
99% of the time it's weight loss. Shouldn't be, but it is.
Lately, I've been getting a lot of inquiries about bowel issues, digestive issues. That's been coming in more frequency, which is a little different. Yeah, kind of like that.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a growing market for that in nutrition, but generally weight loss is the priority. So, you go on a diet. Let's say you're on a low-fat diet. The first thing they say is you got to get rid of all your, French fries, pizzas, donuts,
right,
fried meats, etc.
What must we leave out?
What must we leave out?
And associated with that is going to be the emotional cost of leaving it out, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because people and food are,
we kind of.
I think it's probably normal for most people to be deeply attached to food. Now, there are people who are not. People with eating disorders of various types are not interested in the food itself. It seems as though they're more interested in the effects of the manipulation of the diet in terms of their appearance or some other.
Do you hear
perception.
that? Do you hear that comment from the hater?
Yeah.
You talked about eating disorders.
Right.
They're typing it right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Visions.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, and I think, part of that, you've talked about it many times, comes from the, magazine industry or,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think that most people have a primary interest in aesthetics, not in strength or performance. I think that we've been brought up to be worried about how we look. And I think that years and years ago, this started at the checkout counter of the grocery store when the Weider organization got its bodybuilding magazines into the slots there at the checkout. And I think prior to that, I don't think really people were terribly aware of abs and the effect of the appearance of veins on arms and deltoids and extremely low body fat, this sort of thing. But I think that they did a very effective job in marketing a set of aesthetics to people that previously they hadn't been aware of.
And now,
I think we've still got that today.
Well, now it's evolved to Instagram.
Oh yeah.
People posting their photos up that they have in the perfect lighting, airbrushed and perfect pose, and sometimes professionally taken.
Sometimes.
Yeah, and that's made it worse because you can go on your phone anywhere at any time. Now you're not just at the supermarket reading the magazine you're not going to buy. It's all over your phone. And, the expectations have just continued to become more unrealistic as more people are doing this. But, so, when people go on a diet, the first thing you're told is you have to stop eating everything. You have to stop eating carbs. You have to stop eating fat. You have to stop eating sugar, single ingredient foods, all this complexity that, basically I'm taking your shit away.
Well, it's complicated in a way, and in another way, it's an oversimplification, I think. Single ingredient foods obviously are simpler than multi ingredient foods.
Yeah.
Like French cooking is very complicated. Where you take a duck and you roast a duck, and then you throw the duck away, and then you take the drippings from the duck and blend it into a bread, and you bake the bread, and then you slice the bread, and then you take the bread out of the middle, and then you take the bread and stuff it back into another duck that you've cooked over here with some goose fat and several different types of expensive wine, and then you mince that all up, and then you make a sandwich out of it and serve it on little pieces of bread with the crust cut off, something like that.
Shit, I haven't tried that.
That's French cooking. Well, there's cream, heavy cream and everything.
Yeah.
It's good, but damn, it's complicated.
Yeah, nobody's making that.
Nobody's
making that.
Nobody in North Texas. Not nowadays, anyway.
So, I think another problem, that could be contributing, that I really think is contributing to some of these eating disorders, is our food environment has changed in the last, 50, 60 years. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, certainly, of course. Grocery stores nowadays are completely different than they were when I was little. You go in the grocery store when I was a little boy, and there were 2 kinds of apples, maybe.
And what else was in there? Yeah, talk about that some more, because you had firsthand experience with it.
There was just not the food distribution was a completely different situation back then. Variety was extremely limited in everything. Now, in a lot of ways, the quality was quite a bit higher. For example, just off the top of my head, I think about this quite a bit. 50 years ago, coffee was good. Grocery store coffee was good.
It wasn't Folgers?
It was not Folgers. We had an A&P store here, and that was good coffee. And I remember even, 40 years ago when I was aware of coffee, the coffee quality was a whole lot better in the previous iteration of the coffee market. Right now, unless you go to a lot of lengths to obtain decent coffee, the coffee you buy is going to be shit.
I would agree with that.
It's going to be shit.
Yeah.
The coffee market, the coffee trade has changed
You cannot
tremendously over the past 40 or 50 years.
You cannot intuitively buy. You can't just go grab coffee and have it be good. There's effort required, and this is a good point, because it's going to come up as we keep talking about this, because I think this applies to other foods.
Yes, it certainly does.
Yeah.
It certainly does. You go into any grocery store now, and there are 10 different kinds of apples on the shelf. Mm-hmm. How many of them are worth eating, though? So what we've got now is a more complicated scenario in the grocery store. We've got a lot of variety. Mm-hmm. And variety is one of these interesting things that on the surface looks like it's always an advantage, and it's not. It's not. Variety's not always an advantage if the fact that there's a lot of variety in your ability to make a choice about something heads you in the direction of making a stupid choice. Mm-hmm. Happens all the time, doesn't it? It happens with exercise, and it happens with nutritional concerns as well.
Yeah. So I think we can both agree that when you're purchasing food, there's a thought process involved now, whereas before it was a much more intuitive endeavor.
Right. We had chuck roast, we had sirloin steak, we had T-bones, we had ribeyes, we had several different cuts of meat, we had hamburger meat. It was all of very high quality, much higher quality than it is now, actually. Now we can obtain quality meat, but it requires a sorting process that previously a lack of variety performed for you, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you could see how this could also contribute to some eating disorders when you contextualize it to weight management.
Absolutely.
Some people legitimately need to lose weight.
Yes.
But now that step is involved, whereas, like you said, years ago, they just go, okay, eat these foods,
right,
and you'll lose weight.
Right.
Now there's a million different things being thrown at people. So, I just like to point that out, because no matter what is done to address the weight issue, there's going to be a thought process behind food.
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
Yes, there should be, obviously. One of the most persistent misconceptions in fitness is that, and we discussed this in our podcast of that topic, one of the most consistent misconceptions is that if you need to lose some body fat. Your body fat's up around 30-35%. What you need to do is exercise to get that off.
Mm-hmm.
That's an incredibly persistent myth. It won't go away. The general public thinks that all you've got to do is run.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing could be further from the truth. If you do not modify your diet, there's not any amount of exercise in the world that's going to help you out in terms of remodeling your body composition. And the reason for that is that exercise is just not that consumptive of calories.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't make it that consumptive of calories unless you do really stupid things like run 300 miles a week.
Or play
right?
in the NBA.
Play in the NBA or something like that not everyone can do.
Right.
So in a situation like everyone listening to this podcast is going to be confronted with who need to lose weight, you are going to have to modify your diet in some way.
And you're going to be thinking about it.
Yes. Or you
Pretty
should
much,
be.
till the end of time, because you're in an environment where you can't just pick up food and get the things you need. You're always going to be thinking about it. That comes with the territory of taking responsibility for what's going in your mouth. So that brings us back to this nutrition linear progression.
Yes.
The way I've structured it is I've tried to remove some of those steps in probably the most efficient way possible. And as I was saying earlier, we first start out by adding things because people aren't eating enough of the right things, right? And some of this leads to an involuntary subtraction of things that need to be taken out without even thinking about it.
Okay.
So we'll start with priority number one.
All right.
Protein. Since we're talking to lifters primarily, anybody who's walked in the gym has been told they need to eat more protein because they're lifting weights. That's
right.
Pretty common,
And people will yell and scream all day long, especially the vegan community will yell and scream all day long about that being mythology. Mm-hmm. People get enough protein accidentally. They don't need any more protein.
Well, if you're
sedentary. And that is
yeah.
what we call
bullshit.
Bullshit. Right?
So that is the first thing people learn. Whether it's from us, the guy at Gold's Gym, anybody who works in a weight room is going to tell a new lifter, a new gym member that they need to eat more protein. The motivations tend to vary depending on where you're at. At GNC, they want you to buy more protein.
Right.
So do you need to supplement protein? That really depends on, how much protein you're getting from your diet.
Right. When you start talking to a person that we're going to be dealing with in the fitness industry about getting more protein, the first thing that's going to come to their mind is what supplement do I need to buy? Because they've been taught they need to buy supplements. What do you think?
Well, whey protein.
Whey protein is the whey isolate protein is the best quality supplement you can buy. But as our friend Stan Efferding has pointed out on this podcast in the past, can we just not get it from food?
Of course we can.
Wouldn't it be better to get it from food if we could get it from actual food? I mean, whey protein, a lot of people consider whey isolate protein a food, and I would have to agree with that. But it is a manufactured substance. It's not roast beef.
No.
Which is better?
We don't know. Better how? What are we talking about here?
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Is roast beef better than whey isolate protein?
Well, it's going to have some B12 in it. You're going to get some micronutrients. It's going to have some zinc in it.
There's going to be lots of things in it that are not in a whey protein isolate that would have to be obtained through other sources.
Yeah.
So
you're going to get micronutrients.
I would think that there's going to be essential fatty acids in the
iron
in the roast beef that are not available in the whey protein isolate. I think that on first pass we'd have to say that roast beef's better than whey protein isolate.
I would agree with that.
I would prefer to eat it.
I would too.
But there are circumstances that make whey protein isolate a viable choice for a dietary supplement. And what would those be?
If you're not getting enough from your diet, obviously, and by that, because these guys, I get them every time they hire me. Can I just have 6 shakes a day? And
because it's easy.
Because it's easy.
Because it's easy. And this is the deal.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Supplements are convenient.
Yeah.
Supplements are convenient. They may or may not be better. Well, they're not better.
They're not better.
They're not better than an actual food. But under circumstances that a lot of people find themselves in, a whey protein isolate added to a shake made in a blender or a shaker cup is going to be the way they're going to be able to obtain additional protein in their diet because of the constraints of a schedule or some other set of circumstances that prevent roast beef from being an option. Right?
So that's like that goes back to our food environment, right? I think now more than ever, people just eat away from home for most of their meals.
A lot of people do.
Yeah. And what's the problem with high protein foods? They require refrigeration, cooking. Preparation, lots of
things that are bypassed by the supplement industry for you.
Yeah.
So a supplement is a good idea under certain circumstances, but the better idea, it must be said, is for you to eat food. All right? For you to drink milk, for you to eat meat, cheese, cottage cheese. It's a wonderful, people forget about
I like cottage cheese. It's pretty good.
I really like cottage cheese.
Yeah.
I grew up eating it. We had it at the house when I was growing up. We had it at, back when I was a kid in Wichita Falls Public Schools, we had a really good food service supervisor that was the lady that supervised the lunch program at the schools, Ms. McGinnis, and she did a fabulous job. She was a nice lady. Her daughter and I have known each other since we were kids, and she did a wonderful job with the food service at the public schools. And there, people make fun of the school cafeteria food, but there wasn't anything wrong with ours. We had a great program, and we had cottage cheese available to us as a major part of that menu every single day, and we ended up eating a lot of cottage cheese, and it's good.
That school food has declined.
Oh, I'm
so
sure it
bad.
has, but
yeah.
Betty McGinnis did a fabulous job, and
I believe
people my age forget about how good we had it in the public schools in Wichita Falls back at the time, because we had good lunch. A lot of kids had one good meal a day, and that was at school.
Funny story. When I was a dietetic intern, I was at Iowa Public Schools for the food service rotation. And at the time, the state of Iowa was trying to regulate healthy food, I suppose. And they had this Healthy Kids Act that they passed. And do you know what?
It always means the opposite of the name of the act.
Oh, the food service director, they got a budget to deal with. So French fries were a vegetable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And ketchup's a vegetable.
Yeah, and they got paid for that.
That kind of shit. Just amazing. I don't think we had French fries.
Yeah.
I don't remember them.
Yeah. I think tater tots were a vegetable too.
Yeah, we didn't have those. I think we had mashed potatoes and made out of actual potatoes because potatoes fit the budget.
Yeah.
Potatoes are cheap.
Yeah.
And, as some of you know, I grew up in the cafe business. My dad had a cafe when I was growing up. And my dad was cheap. All right? My dad was cheap. And if there was a cheaper way to do things, then that's what he did. Cheap is making it yourself, planning ahead and making it yourself. Made all of his own bread, made his own sausage, hamburger meat, and mashed potatoes, and all of that stuff. Nothing came out of the kitchen that was not made by him.
Right.
Because it's not only is it better, but it's cheaper. And that's why he ran a successful restaurant for decades. And
now you got
I think that it's probably they're concerned with labor costs and all this other stuff, but not to get too far off the subject, but the simplicity is kind of circumvented by the supplement industry.
Yeah,
I think, because I don't know what the process of making a whey protein isolate is, but I know it's got more steps in it than just opening a gallon of milk, right?
Yeah. So it's not just supplements. So now you have a lot of manufactured foods that you could buy in various places that you couldn't even buy 10 years ago.
Right.
You know, when I first started lifting, I couldn't find protein readily at like at a convenience store unless got lucky. They maybe had one beef jerky bag there. Now they got like 75 options for jerky that aren't necessarily all beef.
Right.
And
they've got, I mean, nowadays they're selling protein bars.
Protein chips.
In convenience stores up and down the highway when you're on a road trip. You have options now that weren't available at the time.
Yeah. Protein bars, protein chips. I just ate a bag right before this podcast. There's brownies, cookies. If you don't want to shake up the protein shake and wash the shaker bottle out, you can buy a bottle of pre-made protein beverage.
Muscle milk,
core
whatever's
power.
available. You know, all this kind of thing these things have emerged in the market.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
Now, but you have to be able to sort through the complexity. And just like with an exercise program, complexity is not always good or productive. Complexity really, especially at the beginning stages of any endeavor, complexity is the enemy. But it is seductive, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. It sounds real good.
It sounds cool.
Yeah.
The more complicated a thing is, the less you probably understand it, and your normal response to that is, if I don't understand it,
it must be
these
good.
guys must be smarter than me, so it must be the right thing to do. And that's not always true.
We're doing it all wrong, man.
Right.
Yeah. So the goal of the protein priority is to basically minimize some of that. So there's a couple things that we do. Well, number one, I provide them with a list of readily available foods that they can find.
Right.
So that includes some of the things we just talked about, these manufactured protein fortified foods.
Right.
Your bars, your chips, your brownies. And then the more commonly, the more traditional high protein foods, so your meat sources. And then now you got your vegan, meatless stuff out there that they've started making. That I get a lot of
pea protein, that sort of thing.
I get a lot of vegans that hire me. They're good people.
They're fine.
Yeah, they're fine. But I had to find a way to feed them, so I had to eat all this stuff and figure out what was palatable.
Yeah.
And some of it's fine. I'd still eat a steak over it, but some of it was fine. Because I'm with you. I have the same philosophy with if you're going to recommend something, you better have fucked around with it a little bit.
You need to know the ins and outs
Yeah.
of it, or you're going to end up looking like a moron, because things are not going to be as you describe them unless you have personal experience with them yourself.
And that's why I laugh at other dietitians or nutritionists that will recommend things that they wouldn't touch.
Okay, so protein.
Protein.
Is animal flesh, things with eyeballs.
Yep.
And a few options in terms of some processed foods that we find acceptable in terms of quality. What's next?
How to measure it.
All right.
So historically, nutritionists and dietitians would recommend that you weigh food with a scale, you use measuring cups, you use measuring spoons, and I always present that option because it's the more precise method of doing things. However, it's very labor intensive. It's not practical in most situations, especially if you're eating away from home. Right. So I've adopted, and other places have done this, I've adopted the idea of using the human hand to kind of come up with some reference sizes.
Okay.
And for protein, I typically say if it's a meat product, you're going to use your fist as your reference portion. So that should be somewhere in the range of 3 to 6 ounces, depending on the size of your fist. That would be one portion of protein. And that should give you about, 18 to 25 grams of protein, depending on, what it actually comes out to. Now, I know somebody's out there typing saying, no, that's too much. That's this many ounces and not this many ounces. But
we're just talking about an approximation.
It's an approximation. And does it really matter if you're 100% precise?
No, as long as you
No, because
so if you have a 4-ounce hamburger patty, let's say you have a 1/4 pounder hamburger patty.
Right.
Is that one serving?
That'd be one serving. What gets me about all that before we end that
Oh,
is
all right.
this is perfectly okay when we're talking about technology, this watch, my
Right.
phone, these lights, this camera, all
Right.
this shit. You talk about food technology, that's unnatural. That's going to kill you.
Right. Yeah.
We
that's
can't
what
advance
it is.
food technology. That's just wrong. It's immoral.
Well, I don't know, man. McDonald's has done a hell of a job of advancing food technology.
Yeah.
How long does it take you to get served, even when they're busy? 4.5, 5 minutes.
Trying to think of a line. It takes maybe 5 minutes if you're
5 minutes.
in a long line.
And you get exactly what you got last time.
Yeah.
It's hot. They just cooked it. It's fresh. So if you've got a quarter pounder with cheese, you've got 2 servings of meat, and your program at that point may very well call for 2 or 3 servings of meat, depending on your protein requirements during the program for that day.
So, ideally, what I recommend most males is 2 of those fist sizes of protein, or 8 ounces, 3 times a day, with the goal of trying to get somewhere in the ballpark of 150 to 250 total grams for the whole day. Now, if you do that, you should be able to accomplish that because you're also getting protein from other sources.
Right.
You're not just getting it from animal products. And then I kind of give a guide for other types of protein-rich food. So what I typically say is, okay, it's a fist or it's 20 to 25 grams worth if you're going to do it that way, because you can't always just use this. So if I go get a something at the store like a bag of protein chips, I'm going to have to look at the label.
Right.
It's going to have the label. The measurement issue comes with meats typically.
Right.
Milk, you'll have the serving sizes. Dairy, you'll typically have the serving sizes, but with meat, you won't. So you need a reference
So a
range.
quarter pounder patty has how many grams of protein?
About 20 to 25 grams, probably.
Right.
I don't have the nutrition facts in front
So
of me.
you
but
get
somewhere
40, 50 grams of protein from a double quarter pounder with cheese.
in there. Yeah, and if you're doing that 3 times a day, you're at about 150 right there.
Right. And then
Yeah.
make it up with the rest of your intake.
So the problem with eating a double quarter pounder with cheese 3 times a day every day, that's not what we're trying to tell people to do.
No,
that's
it's not. No.
That's the guy on the highway that's driving from Phoenix to Wichita Falls after a long weekend.
Right.
He needs to stop at McDonald's, but
Right.
on a daily basis, that's not what we're telling people.
No,
to
no,
do.
no. Obviously, but they're smart enough
Yeah.
to know that.
Of course.
Except for these fucking morons.
Man, I am
Okay.
the dietitian that recommended McDonald's as of today. That
You
just
are.
happened.
You're on record.
Yeah, somebody's saying it.
On record.
No, the items that I've historically recommended at McDonald's to my clients are the egg white delights. The snack wraps are pretty good.
Right.
There's lean meat there. So that was the next
Sure.
thing I was going to say. We're typically recommending lean meat,
Right.
1 to 2 grams of fat per ounce of meat. So if you're eating a 4-ounce portion, you're getting 4 to 8 grams of fat, which is about 72 calories tops from fat,
Right.
which isn't very high. So yeah, typically I say go with lean meat ideally, and we try to kind of drill that habit because now we're adding more protein into the diet because we know that the guy that came to us is eating about 60 to 70 grams, maybe 100, when he needs to be eating more than that to train. The woman that comes to us is eating about 40 grams a day, so she needs to get 1 fist 3 times a day since she doesn't need as much as the male.
Right.
And, by adding that protein, we're accomplishing a couple of things. That person's now fuller, so they're less likely to be like, oh, crap, I'm starving. Oh, jar of M&Ms.
Right.
Cookie,
Right.
donut. Because
Right.
this is there's a lot of involuntary eating that goes on throughout the day. And we're trying to,
This is largely what's wrong with nutrition science papers. Might as well just throw that in.
Yeah.
If you self-report your consumption, you're going to leave off what Robert just called the involuntary eating. Mm-hmm. You're not going to report that, and the data is always bad. So that kind of wraps up measuring. It gives us some tools to measure the protein intake. What's next on the nutritional linear progression?
So from there, we move to carbs. Once you've accomplished your protein goal, which is defined as doing this 7 days per week, not part-time dieting, not Monday through Friday, and then you're going to eat pizza and donuts on Saturday and Sunday. Has to be 7 consecutive days because None of this matters if you're inconsistent. That's why I'm not so concerned about the accuracy of the measurement, because you can measure something that may not be precisely what's in it, but if you're doing it the same exact way every time, if you adjust the amount,
then we are in control.
yeah, we're adjusting the calories, right?
Right.
Just like you said with plates. If you have plates that aren't calibrated, you can mark them and use the same plates every time, and you're incrementally loading
Even
without.
if they're not 45s, we know how much weight's on the bar.
Exactly. Same concept with food. The food labels aren't even accurate. I think people don't understand that. Food labels are notoriously inaccurate. When they've actually, these are actual studies because they're measuring shit. They will do what's called bomb calorimetry on the food, where they'll blow it up and they can measure the calories that are in
The
a specific
actual
food.
heat content of
The heat content of the food. And the amount that they find in the food that they blow up does not match the amount that's on the label a lot of the time. There's papers published on this. And
Isn't that fascinating?
yeah, because
Data is not actually data.
interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
So a lot of these food labels are based upon
You
experiment.
must be a science denier,
I must be.
a denialist. You're a science denialist.
Science I'm good with. Professional research is where I start to have questions.
Professional research is a different matter entirely, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the whole.
That's a topic for another show.
Exactly.
In fact, so
A lot of our values that we see on these labels come from measurements that were collected on single samples 100 years ago, and then they're extrapolating.
and they've just persisted.
So all slices of white bread must be the same content of the slice of white bread in 1932 or whenever.
Whenever that first measurement was taken.
And that's fine, because we're not interested in knowing the exact content of these foods. We're interested in being consistent so that we can manipulate our intake in a more consistent, reliable way.
If you know you're consistent with your intake during the day and you go down, you've reduced your caloric intake.
Yeah.
Right.
Even if it may not match the exact numbers.
Right.
Because
the numbers are not relevant. What's the decrease, the fact that there is a decrease is relevant.
So this is why this is a habit-based approach, right? And the weekly, the changes throughout the week are important too. So if you're consistent Monday through Friday, and then you're having a complete detraction from your calorie intake during the week, on the weekend, you're now inconsistent.
Right.
And that's the most common reason people fail any diet, is that lack of consistency when they're out of their controlled environment. So that's another reason for the hand size portions, because you're going to eat in situations where you have a little bit less control. And I'm not going to sit here and say you need 75 Tupperware containers in your fridge. That works for some people. I've done it. Have you done that, Rip?
No.
Yeah.
I have not done that.
You haven't done that dumb shit?
No, I have not done that.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of not caring about it enough to.
Well, you told me you did every stupid thing everybody.
I have done every except that.
Okay, you never did that one.
Except that one.
Okay.
Except that one.
Well, bodybuilders and these physique competitor people, they do that. They try to keep it to a science.
And carry around their food all the time.
If you're getting to single-digit body fat,
if that's what you've got to do, then that's the way it's got to be done.
Yeah.
There is no doubt.
Yeah.
You have to have that kind of dial-in on your dietary intake, and it's going to require that you don't eat other people's food.
Mm-hmm. But that's a competitor we're talking about.
Right.
That's not,
Right.
who's watching this.
That's not even a guy who just needs to drop 5% body fat. That's a pro.
Yeah. Different
That's a
situation.
pro. Different situation outside the topic of this discussion.
So, consistency. This is going to apply to each priority. So, the next priority is carbs. And I address those similar, whether it's weight gain or weight loss, but with some differences. I want to address the lack of vegetable consumption first.
Okay.
And I think that applies to both situations, because the average American eats a high-fat, high-carb diet that's low in fruits and vegetables. We all know this. So
And probably low in protein as well.
And low in protein as well.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. At least good quality protein. They might be getting, a few grams here and there from all the junk they're eating, but they're not getting, complete protein sources from their diet.
Right.
So I'm not going to be that dietitian that says, oh, you got to eat a bunch of fruits and vegetables. I try to be realistic here, and I say one vegetable a day to start out.
Just something that grew from the soil, right?
And then I'll couple that with a handful, so this is what a handful looks like, of complex carbohydrates or fruit. Because a serving of fruit typically has 15 grams of carb. It doesn't have any fat, doesn't have any protein, but the carb content is similar to a serving of grains. So a slice of bread is also going to have roughly 15 grams of carbohydrate. So that's why I kind of put fruit next to the starchy / complex carbohydrate. And, you know, if we're talking about a slice of bread, I say use your entire hand. This is about the size of a slice of bread. And you can do that or you can measure. So I say one serving of complex carbohydrate is 15 grams. So what I'll say for the male is have 2 of those 3 to 4 times a day.
So a handful
A handful.
is 15 grams. And this would be cooked rice.
Cooked rice, cooked pasta.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, what's that going to look like? Since we're not going to, our mom doesn't let us put her hand in the pot. What is that going to look like in the spoon?
I forgot my names of my spoons, Rip.
Well,
What's the
one's
yeah?
Fred the spoon and James the spoon.
The one that
Aloysius the spoon. No, you're talking about a serving spoon.
Yeah.
So tablespoons, teaspoons, notwithstanding, a serving spoon. The guy that's, you know, like that blue spoon in my kitchen. He's got a
I used to know what all these
spoon
were.
on him about this big. That's probably about a handful, isn't it?
Yeah. Or like
I think we need
Chipotle spoon.
what we need to do is Chipotle spoon. They serve with out of the steam table at Chipotle. That is a
I got to brush up on my food service.
well. What we need to do, and here's our here we talked about this in terms of preparation for the next seminar we're talking about. We're going to take pictures of
what this all looks like.
of what this all looks like, so that that we can quantify it, seat of the pants, quantify what 15 grams looks like in a spoon, and what's 15 grams of rice look like in a serving spoon. So you'll know.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's terribly important to get that done.
Yeah, visuals got to be there.
Yep, it does.
So I'm going to do that whether they're losing or gaining weight. Because chances are they're eating a bunch of crap, chips, and,
Right.
you know.
Did you like my stew I made the other night?
Oh, that was amazing, man. God damn.
My lamb stew.
That was
Just
good.
sheep meat. I had.
Is that what,
It's one of the functions of having a freezer full of aged mutton is that you make wonderful stew.
That
out of
was
those.
real
I
good.
put 2 shoulder roasts in that pot. I trimmed 2 shoulder roasts out, boned them, and threw a lot of the fat away. Gave the fat to the dogs, and then left enough of it in there for flavor, and then just we cooked that, bay leaf, salt, pepper, little bit. I don't even think I put any garlic in there. And then potatoes and carrots, just plain old food. Now, when you're talking about vegetables in this context, do you count potatoes as a vegetable?
that is a starchy vegetable, so that would go into the complex carb / starch category.
Right. But the carrots would have been.
I count them as a vegetable, but the eating disorder people like to think they're a starch because they have 7 carbs.
The
or
glycemic
5.
index and all that other shit.
It has 7 carbs instead of 5.
Oh my God.
That's a carb.
Yeah, it's a carb.
Yeah,
It's a carb.
Carrots are a vegetable.
There's a bunch of vitamins.
It's a
Carrot,
non-starchy
they're orange,
vegetable.
they're beautiful. Carrots are wonderful.
Yeah.
Bugs Bunny,
Everybody
he had
remembers
his head out of his ass. He really did.
He knew he was fast too.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah. He was a vegan,
he was.
but he was cool.
He was cool. He was, as opposed to vegans.
Yeah.
Nowadays, Bugs Bunny was cool.
Yeah. Some vegans are cool.
1 or 2 of them. Shit.
I have a client who's a vegan who's done real well in the program. He eats a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah.
Well, good.
He taught me about all these products they sell now because
Well, good.
I had to get the guy strong, Rip. So I just
Yeah.
started eating a bunch of veg and meat substitutes, and it was
God.
it was educational.
Well, then I take it all back.
Well, hey, when I was
All of it. Everything bad I've ever said about vegans, I take it back because Robert knows one that's cool.
thanks, Rip. You're welcome.
Knows one that's cool. So,
Yeah.
anyway, that all notwithstanding, have some meat, okay?
Have some vegetables.
Have some vegetables.
Have some fibrous
Have some-
carbohydrates.
All right, now fibrous carbohydrates. Are you going to? Is that a different thing than the vegetable?
Vegetables have fiber in them, but I was referring to fruits and whole grains.
The categories within your classification of carbohydrates are what?
Vegetable is one classification. Then you have complex
Starchy.
complex carbohydrate / starchy vegetables or fruit,
Right.
because the carbohydrate content of a serving is similar with fruit and starch.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've got vegetables, which are cabbages and carrots and green things, right? I've got fruits, which are grow on trees or vines, and they're sweet, and everybody knows what a fruit is when they see one. Tomatoes a fruit,
Yep.
right? And then we've got
But ketchup's a vegetable somehow.
ketchups. So then we've got the third type is the starchy vegetables, which is potatoes and grains.
Yep.
And products made from potatoes and grains. So there's three categories of carbohydrates, right?
Corn would be in that third one too, and
Right.
peas.
Corn, peas, beans, beans. That one of the most hilarious things.
Beans in a weird category.
Beans
with
in a weird
nutritionists.
category if you're the food pyramid, because the government is fond of saying meats and beans, meats or beans, like they're equivalent creatures.
Legumes are in the
And I'm sorry, they're not.
legumes.
Legumes are not meat. No, they're not meat.
They grow.
They're not high protein. They're high starch, and they've got a bunch of goofy ass starch in them that make people fart. Meats and beans. They can't say it if it's not true. That's right. They can't say it if it's not true. That's how we say it here in North Texas. You can't say it if it's not true.
Okay.
Except that it's the government.
They can say whatever they want.
They say whatever they want, and they do all day long.
Oh yeah.
Meats and beans. It's not the same thing, and I don't think that. I think that you need to quit thinking of them as the same thing because they're not equivalent. Why do they want them to be the same thing? Why do they want them so bad?
Because there's 7 grams of protein per serving of beans or legumes, and there's 7 grams per ounce of meat.
But the quality of the protein is so completely different
Of course,
that it's not the same thing.
it's not the same thing.
It's
now.
not the same thing. Oh, God almighty. So just keep that in mind. Meats or beans is a creation of the government, and it's not useful for our purposes.
Right.
All right. So those are the 3 types of carbohydrates. Now,
So what we've accomplished here is
we've got
we have
protein.
We're getting enough protein now because we're eating vegetables and high fibers, whole grains, and fruits. We're getting more fiber.
We're getting more fiber, and we're getting some protein.
Yeah.
From some lower quality protein from our carbohydrate division, even though it does generate into the macro protein into the diet,
And more water.
right?
What does this accomplish? Now you're a little bit fuller.
Right. More room is occupied in your stomach.
Less involuntary eating. That's what I'm thinking about.
Right. So when you feel like you've got enough food in your stomach, that's satiety.
Yes.
Satiation is the persistence of the feeling of satisfaction from the meal. Right. And so different foods produce different levels of both of these things. For example,
Yes.
when Chinese food is famous for going away within an hour.
So is cereal.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you could just keep eating it nonstop.
Right.
So protein has the greatest effect on both of them.
On satiation.
On satiation, yes.
Right.
And then carbs would be next. Protein's the most satiating. Then fat.
Because it's persistent in the gut.
Yeah.
Because it takes a long time to digest a protein, and protein digestion primarily takes place in the stomach.
Yeah. Then
the first parts of it
Yep.
do. And so in other words, the gut holds, the stomach holds a protein bolus until a lot of that.
Because you got to denature it.
You got to denature it. You've
Break
got,
it apart.
The acids, stomach acid, the hydrochloric acid in the stomach, and enzymes that are secreted into the stomach
To break that shit apart.
to break that shit apart. And it holds it there until those processes are largely completed, and then it allows it to move into the small intestine.
Which takes much longer than something like cereal or candy, sugar. That's going to break down a lot faster. The next macro on the satiation hierarchy would be fat. So fat's more satiating than carbohydrate.
Right.
Protein is more satiating than fat.
Right.
And then carbohydrate, I would divide that. I'd say that if it's high fiber, it's going to be more satiating than if it's just pure sugar.
Right.
And foods that are high in fiber also have a high water content. So that also contributes to that satiating feeling.
To satiety, the feeling of fullness.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Fat. All right.
That's the last one I
That's
addressed.
the last one we address in the nutritional linear progression. Fat. What do we do with fat? We have the interesting thing about fat is that there are essential fatty acids, and fatty acids. We'll talk about those in a minute. There are no essential carbohydrates. There are essential proteins, essential amino acids. There are essential fatty acids, but there are no essential carbohydrates. And this has implications for the construction of our dietary program.
So with fat, you typically don't have to think about it to get enough fat in your diet.
There's usually enough accidentally in the protein.
Nobody's accidentally
component.
eating low fat.
Right.
That's just not happening. It's very difficult to do that.
Right.
So by the time we've gotten enough protein in the diet from the high protein sources, we've gotten vegetables in the diet, we've got more fiber in the diet through complex carbohydrates and fruits. Now we've accomplished all this for 7 days in a row, week after week after week. This person has a pretty balanced diet at this point. Then we move to fat. So if they're losing weight, that's the first thing we're going to pull because it contributes the least to performance under the bar because we want this person to continue to train and make progress.
To train, you have to have carbs. Right?
Yeah.
It's hard to train on keto.
Very.
It's
fashionable.
perfectly good option.
It's fashionable.
It's fashionable, and it's a good option for a sedentary person to lose a bunch of body fat. The Atkins diet, I've said this several times, Atkins diet, if you're sitting around on your ass, you can lose a bunch of body fat on Atkins because you automatically eat fewer calories because you are not hungry. But
Start training.
you can't train on a low-carb diet. You can't do it. You can't get recovered.
Because there's just not enough. That's just the way that the metabolic processes work.
Right.
If you're lifting weights, you're using up a bunch of creatine, you're using up a bunch of glycogen. You can't effectively burn fat. You're burning some because these energy systems are not all or nothing. They're all active at the same time, but you're not going to tap into fat stores during, heavy set of squats. You're just not
More
going
importantly, you're going to be sore all the time
Yeah.
because of the contribution of carbohydrate fraction to the recovery process. And so we're talking, if we're training, and we're assuming you're training, we're talking about the sacrifice in terms of total calories coming from the fat portion.
There's a couple benefits to that. Number one, you can pull more calories with less food out of your diet because the caloric density of fat is over twice that of carbs. Yeah,
You can eat more food in terms of satiety. You can fill your stomach easier with a low-fat diet and perceive that you have eaten enough food to satiate your hunger. And it's more satisfying to do it like that.
That's the whole origin of the whole Ornish diet where, the title of the book said, eat more, weigh less. That's kind of where it comes from. You're getting more food volume for the same number of calories.
Right.
If you're on a low fat versus a high fat, you're going to get less food for the same number of calories on a high fat.
And the old standby bodybuilder diet, chicken breasts and rice. Mm-hmm. You get full on chicken breasts and rice. You just don't stay that way very long.
So there's the satiation thing, right?
Right. It's satiety, but not good satiation.
Yeah, because then you're hungry. Since you don't have the fat, you're hungry every few hours.
Right.
And it's a common complaint you hear from bodybuilders or people that train that way is that they're constantly hungry when they're doing that.
Right. Even though they're eating a lot of food.
Yeah. But if you like to chew a lot, it's a pretty good diet. Mm-hmm. But if you're training, it's the best way to go because
you're getting the carbs and you can actually train on the carbs.
You're going to bend the curve of that performance loss that may occur. Now, a novice shouldn't lose as much. An overweight, obese novice should still be able to get stronger.
Right, sure.
Yeah, so we got to clarify that, who we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. An intermediate advanced lifter is going to get weaker at some point on a diet because he's just so far along the adaptation curve that everything has to be present in order, in terms of recovery, to facilitate more progress. You start pulling resources away, he's going to suffer.
Right.
But the overweight novice is not in that situation.
He doesn't have anything to worry about in terms of performance decrement. So let's explain the fats then. Mm-hmm. There are essential fatty acids. What is a triglyceride? What's a fatty acid?
Triglyceride is composed.
You've seen this on your blood test.
Yeah.
Okay.
Triglyceride is composed of fatty acids and glycerol backbone, right?
Right.
And that floats around in your blood, and it's also stored in your fat stores. So when we're talking about dietary...
It's a storage form of fat.
Yeah. When we're talking about fat, we're talking about triglycerides.
Right.
Yeah.
We're talking about fat, macro fat.
Yeah.
We're talking about triglycerides because that's the form in which, unless we're talking about oils, we're talking about eating animal fat. We're talking about eating triglycerides, which are composed of fatty acids. 3, is it? So
that's where
and then glycerides.
Yeah. So there's 3.
Yes, 3 fatty acids
and a glycerol
attached
backbone.
to a glycerol backbone, and that's a triglyceride. So let's demystify that. You've all seen this on your blood test, and it's a measure of the circulating amount of triglyceride in your bloodstream.
And the energy that's extracted from fat comes from the fatty acids, not from the glycerol.
Right.
So I think that's where you were going with.
So yes, when the molecule breaks down, the fatty acids are the things that compose the lipids in your diet. Mm-hmm. So a fatty acid is a long chain of...
Could be medium, could be short too.
Could be, all right. So it's either a long, medium, or short chain of carbon atoms with hydrogen on either side of them. And then, once we are talking about fatty acids, now we're talking about saturated or unsaturated.
Mm-hmm. And that refers to whether they are hydrogenated or not, so whether they have hydrogens attached to them or not, and the structure of the chemical bonds, which we don't need to go into here.
So the fatty acids are the individual lipid components that are attached to the triglycerides, and all of those are broken down, and the fatty acids are used as fuel for the oxidative metabolism that we do on a daily basis all day long.
What you're doing right now.
What I'm doing right now, what everybody's doing all day long. They're the basis of the generation of ATP for your energy systems. And the fats produce basically energy all day long. Mm-hmm. You have a lot of stored fat. Some of us have quite a bit of stored fat, and we can subsist on the metabolism of fatty acids, and that's the basis of all of our energy systems. Fats are extremely important in terms of bioenergetics. But since we have a bunch of fat stored on us already, and since fats are very, very good at generating stored ATP already, then they are the things we can pull out of the diet in order to create a lower amount of caloric intake. And that's, I think, what the basis of this particular type of dietary modification is. Now,
Precisely.
there are some essential fatty acids. Talk about those.
So you have your omega-3s, which are found in fish products, or if you're taking a fish oil supplement, those are real popular.
And we're not going to talk about the chemistry of that, but you everybody knows the term omega-3 and omega-6. All right. What about other essential fatty acids?
Well, then you're getting into differently. You have DHA and EPA, which are both omega-3.
Right.
And they are correlated with improvements in cardiometabolic health. They have anti-inflammatory properties, although that's been debated.
Right.
Go ahead.
And how do we make sure we get enough of those if we're just in a normal diet? Do you recommend a fish oil supplement, or you like to just... Stan talks about just eating salmon 2 or 3 days a week, and you get enough from those.
We've been recommending that for 30 years.
For salmon?
Yeah. 2 to 3 times a week. You're not going to get mercury poisoning. That's been debunked.
Oh, that's all bullshit.
Yeah.
It was always bullshit. So, fats. So how are we going to manage the measurement of fats?
We can use our thumbs for most substances, or you can use a tablespoon. Most people have a tablespoon. You don't necessarily.
Everybody's got a thumb. Well, that's not fair.
No. That guy without the thumb is pissed off.
That's not fair.
He's over there
I've just
cussing
insulted
at
a huge swath of the population. So, let's say he remembers what a thumb looks like, though.
Yeah, looks
So
like this.
he's probably acutely aware of it since it's gone, and that's about how much fat.
That's about 7 grams of fat.
A thumb-sized portion. A tablespoon's about 7 grams of fat.
Maybe a little more if you have a
Whether
huge
it's
thumb.
butter or olive oil or coconut oil or anything, right?
Yeah. Oils.
Give or take.
Yeah. Oils, I prefer spoons.
Right?
Yeah. Use a tablespoon.
Since there's not any way to hold a thumb-sized piece of oil.
Yeah, so half tablespoon is 1. Full tablespoon is 2 servings of fat. So that's going to give you about 14 grams of fat in a tablespoon of olive oil.
All right.
Yeah. Or canola oil.
Right.
Coconut oil solid, so you could probably go with the thumb size there. Or if you're just weighing it on a scale, that's always an option.
I see no reason to eat canola oil or sunflower seed oil or anything. They're so unsaturated, and they get stale real fast, and they don't have any flavor. And I would rather eat olive oil, good olive oil, or butter, or bacon grease.
This is probably a good time to talk about why fat is not necessarily bad because it's fat. So, you're sitting there to talk about bacon grease and egg yolks.
Right,
and,
right.
Eating this stuff is fine. It's, most people don't need to eat a lot of it.
No. Especially if they're trying, again, because fat is the most efficient contributor of calories to your macronutrient profile.
That's right.
And if you're gonna go hypocaloric, fat's going to be the logical place
up to
sacrifice calories because of the satiety thing. And satiety is accomplished with a full stomach, and you can get full without a bunch of fat. Absolutely true.
Absolutely true. So yesterday I did something that I hadn't done before when talking about this. I started setting limits because there's a point to which cutting more fat becomes impractical. Just like if you're gaining weight, there is a point at which adding more carbs becomes impractical. If you start eating 600, 700, 800 carbs, you're chewing all day.
It's too big a load on your gut, too.
And
it's just a bunch of digestion that needs to take place.
And most of us are only going to store about 500 total grams of glucose as glycogen. That's liver and muscle combined.
The whole damn thing.
Yeah. So 700-800 carbs, I don't know that it's going to do a whole lot. And the more carbs you eat, the more you burn them off. So, for that guy who's eating 500 carbs and he needs to gain some more weight, he's going to add more fat to his diet. He might need those 8 eggs, to gain more body weight. And gaining body fat isn't necessarily a bad thing either.
Not if it's already too low.
Yeah,
no.
Precisely right.
Guy walking around at 5% body fat because of a previous eating disorder, or just because he's, naturally got very low body fat, could certainly stand to gain some body fat.
Yeah. And that's...
Really.
And
really.
That is not to say that you need to walk around looking like you're pregnant.
No.
We're not telling people to go get a 48-inch waistline, But when you gain body fat, you're not just gaining it on your midsection.
These people
Bottom
will be
3%.
unable.
They've already stopped listening.
Distinguish.
Should I even finish the sentence? They're not listening. Yeah. You're gaining body fat around your joints and your connective tissues, too.
Sure.
Body fat's a good insulator.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a cushion.
It's a cushion.
It's a rebounder.
And remember, these...
It's a structural component of a joint.
Mm-hmm. And if you don't have enough of it, guess what? Shit starts to hurt when you got a bar on your back.
That's right.
And it happens like clockwork. These skinny guys that try to squat 3 times a week and add weight to their squat complain of more joint pain than the fat guys.
Right.
Almost every time.
Right.
So...
And let's just get this out in the open here. It is the natural state of human body composition is not 10% body fat. Okay? Bodybuilding has restructured several people's minds in the wrong direction. All right? It is not natural to be as low as 10% body fat. Being 5% body fat for a contest and having that displayed as normal human body composition is wrong. Right? Normal human body composition is no more 8% body fat than it is 30% body fat. And you people need to process this.
I would agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it was, why is it so damn hard to get there? Why is
That's right. Why does
why
does it take extraordinary means to get down below 10% body fat? Because it's not normal.
And why do people who previously don't have eating disorders start to develop symptoms of them when they start getting that low? That was something Carter talked about in the lecture yesterday.
Right.
He said when he got down to 135, he started getting a bunch of body image issues and a bunch of shit he never experienced
He became
before.
crazy.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Because you're subjecting yourself to a whole bunch of circumstances that your central nervous system is not designed to deal with. You know, humans don't do well in circumstances of privation. Okay? If you're starving to death, either voluntarily or involuntarily, this is not metabolically optimal.
You're going to go
It's
crazy.
not psychologically optimal. It's not physiologically optimal. There's a lot of things wrong with that. And if this is why anorexia nervosa is a disease process. Okay? Get the idea that everybody needs to have washboard abs and veins on their deltoids. Get that out of your mind. There are a few people who are born with that level of subcutaneous body fat as a general tendency, but that's not normal. It's not species wide, and it's not good to be that low in body fat. People don't do well at 8%. People do better at 15%.
And the guys that get down to 8, 7, 6% for shows will tell you the exact same thing you said. That they do not stay there, and it's for the purpose of competing.
They don't stay there because they can't stay there. They can't stay there.
They can't.
They can't stay there.
We have another coach who got himself down to 10% because he just wanted to do it, take a picture, and never, ever do it again. And he said at the very end of that, he's like, I forgot what he said he saw, but he saw some sort of junk food, and he's like, I just started eating it nonstop, and it was like an out-of-body experience. I didn't know why I was doing it.
It's involuntary.
He
Involuntary
said he was
action.
watching himself do it, and he's like, I couldn't stop.
Yes, it makes you nuts, doesn't it?
The human body has
God.
mechanisms to protect against this.
Okay, so let's sum up quickly. We've talked about protein, carbohydrates, and fat. Let's sum up this wide-ranging, I guess you could call it, discussion. There's probably a different term some people would use for it than that. Let's sum up this novice or the nutritional linear progression, shall we?
So you're going to start with protein, move on to carbs and vegetables, and then adjust fat. And when you're at each one of these, proteins typically addressed maybe in a week or two, depending on the person. Once you get to carbs and fat, that's where it becomes kind of gray depending on the priority. So the weight loss guy is going to have to subtract carbs at some point later after he's subtracted fat. The weight gain guy may have to repeat the carb step several times over until he's getting some good training in and he starts gaining some weight. And the fat guy may eventually need to add fat because he's added too many carbs. So once you get beyond protein, that's where it kind of becomes gray, and you have to alter it, based on the person. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, this is an excellent way to think about your approach to nutrition as you approach your training. When we start training, the basic premise of our approach to training is to find out where you are now. How strong are you on the major structural exercises? Learn to do them correctly, and then we're going to measure how much weight you can do the first workout. And then the process begins, and that process is to add weight to the bar every time you train. And the amount of weight you add to the bar will vary in proportion to the amount of muscle mass used in each one of these exercises. You may add 10 or 15 pounds every workout to your deadlift for a while. You'll add 10, maybe 7.5 pounds to your squat every workout for a while. The bench will go up 5 pounds. The press will only go up 2.5 pounds, even at first. And this is reflective of the amount of muscle mass that each one of these exercises uses during the execution of the full range of motion of the exercise. But what we do is we apply the process of finding out where you are and then incrementally increasing the amount of weight you use to force an adaptation. We're going to apply a stress, an incrementally increasing amount of stress from which you will recover to produce an adaptation which is stronger. All right? So how does the nutritional linear progression look like in that context?
Well, when the guy comes into his first workout, he's not expending a whole lot of calories. He's not requiring a whole lot of resources because he barely knows how to move with a barbell.
Right.
He needs to eat enough protein right off the bat because...
Right. Because the stress requires recovery.
Yeah. So that's the first thing we address. We ramp the protein up the fastest. And then as he goes along and things start getting harder, he has to eat more and more carbs, more and more fat. But you start with carbs first because carbs facilitate the actual training event.
Right.
Protein primarily has a recovery role in all this. Carbs helps during the workout, then it helps after the workout by refilling those glycogen stores. Mm-hmm. So that's why we address carbs second. So we address protein first for the recovery aspect. We address carbs second for the training aspect. Mm-hmm. And then if the person needs to lose weight, we start adjusting fat. The person needs to gain weight or adjusting fat down. We start reducing fat intake. If the person needs to gain weight and he's eaten a sufficient amount of carbohydrates to where it's becoming impractical to eat more, then he needs to add more fat to his diet to gain more weight.
Okay. So proteins for recovery, carbohydrates are for training, and fat is for adjusting body composition.
Mm-hmm. That's
briefly. Okay. I think that's a real good way to think about this. And if you're sufficiently interested in this, I'd invite you to look on the events calendar, and we'll be offering seminars with Robert, and Will Morris will be doing what we call recovery seminars that investigate various aspects of both nutrition and injury rehabilitation. And we're doing these together because they kind of seem to fit. They're very interesting topics that people who have been training for possibly a longer period of time or become interested in. If you're interested enough to keep training over 2 or 3 years, you're interested in these things as well. You know, dealing with injuries is a very important part of managing your training, and dealing with your diet's a very important part of managing your training. So if you're interested in these things, find an event and let's get you set up so you can learn from the pros. Robert, thanks for being here. Thanks for coming again to Wichita Falls, your second home here in North America. And thank you for joining us on Starting Strength Radio. We'll see you next time.